My name is Aisha Adams, and today I'm going to be completing a book review on the text I Read It But I Don't Get It, Comprehension Strategies for Adolescent Readers by Chris Tavani. Chris Tavani breaks the text down into 3 different sections, which are setting the stage, in support of strategic reading, and access tools. The text is actually 9 chapters, but I'm going to be focusing on 7 key points. My first is building and solidifying relationships with students. Throughout the text, she shows a reflection of her interaction with her students. She starts out with talking about fake reading and how the students enter the classroom with a perception of what class will be like, and then how later on in class things change. Ownership of reading comprehension. She discusses the way that students have to take ownership of their comprehension. They have to take ownership of the fact that they don't understand what they're reading, and they have to use the tools that are provided to help them understand. Relevance. She discusses what is the purpose for reading? Why are we reading the text that we are reading? Does the text that you read at home, is that text relevant? Is that actually considered reading? If you're reading a magazine or if you're reading on social media. Teacher modeling, that's one of the main points that she hones in on throughout the book. You have to model your expectations in the classroom in order to have successful students. If you assume that they know something, you can't really expect them to be successful. She provides tools to help students identify when they're confused and how to fix being confused. What tools can they use to fix being confused instead of just stopping reading? She reflects as a teacher. She provides teaching points at the end of each chapter, telling what works, what the teacher can do, and reflections from students. So each chapter begins with a quote or a reflection from a student that she has had previously. So Chris Tavani starts the book off with a chapter called Fake Reading, and this is where she establishes her credibility. She discusses the first day of a reading workshop class that she has and the interaction that she had with her students. And I think this is really powerful, especially for new teachers, thinking about, okay, that first day of school, students have a certain perception of what the class is going to be about. And she shows that to her reader. And on top of showing that, she doesn't just show her perspective, she shares what her students are thinking and their reactions and their body language. She doesn't just talk about what's going on in the classroom. She also discusses the fact that she was not the best reader in school. She states that she didn't have a problem decoding text, but she had a problem understanding. She faked comprehension for years and knew it would eventually catch up with her. And as an adult, of course she's, a fluent reader, but it goes back to the career choices that she made and her actual credibility. So she started out as a teacher in a suburban school, and she's taught from elementary school all the way to secondary school, and even been a reading specialist and an English teacher. So I think that's really important because a lot of books that we read are written by actual teachers, and it's not just a made-up scenario when we're reading the text, and it's actual reflections from someone who's actually been in a classroom. One of the most important things as a teacher that you have to do is establish positive relationships with your students. So being the teacher of a reading workshop class, Chris Tavani is talking about this first day, and she mentions that several of her students didn't show up because they didn't want to be in a reading class. But she also mentions that after that first day, some of those students who didn't show up decided to show up because she built that rapport within that first day. She asked the students, what were their expectations for the class, and she even shared some of her own stories. I like the fact that she mentioned that she started fake reading in 6th grade. And that's usually around the time that you are required to start reading those more dense novels, and it's not exactly just reading for fun anymore. So in this chapter about fake reading, something else that she focuses on is why and how students fake reading. So she gave her students a task where they had to write down what they think good readers do when they're reading. And a lot of the students were struggling, but the good thing was she was able to redirect and have her students write down what they do when they read, because a lot of them were already struggling readers. And something that was mentioned that I thought was very powerful was the fact that struggling readers, they already start feeling defeated before they begin because of the fact that they may not test well, or they've had teachers tell them before, you're not really a good reader, or you need to go read something that's simpler because you don't read very well. So some of the things that students mention that they do that I thought were interesting were listen to a Walkman while reading, or they don't read for fun, they daydream, they fake read, they forget what they read, or they lose their place. And it kind of explains why there are so many struggling readers. And by the time the students get to secondary school, teachers are not planning to still be teaching reading. And that's where a lot of teacher frustration comes in at, because secondary teachers are expecting students to come in and learn the content knowledge and not actually have to be taught how to read and how to decode and analyze the text, because the expectation is that they covered all of this in elementary school. So one of my takeaways from this chapter is, teachers have to be very careful of the energy that they put in the atmosphere of their classroom, because students will take that with them. And if you make them feel defeated, or if they feel that they cannot be successful, that kills their motivation, and they will fake read, and they won't see why they should even try when it comes to reading. So something that I found immediately in the chapter, The Realities of Reading, is a quote that I actually took out. Many believe that reading is merely sounding out words. So we have to actually know what reading is. And it takes me back to my first year of teaching, where I had a situation with a former teacher where I asked a question about her students' ability to read. And this particular teacher was a science teacher. And of course, I'm an English language arts teacher. So my definition of reading is something a little bit different than some other people's definitions of reading. So it's definitely more than sounding out words. I actually really like the definition that she has in this chapter, in the section Redefining Reading. So she has, reading must be about thinking and constructing meaning. It's much more than pronouncing words. Researchers today define reading as a complex recursive thinking process. So just because a student can sound out the words on the page does not mean that they actually are understanding what is being read. So something that I really liked was the things that she said that a good reader does. So good readers, they use prior knowledge. They connect the things that they know from their own prior experiences or books and things that they've read before, seen on TV. They make those connections. They question the text. They ask questions while they're reading. They draw inferences. They monitor whether they understand what they're reading or not. They use fix-up strategies, and she lists those fix-up strategies later on in the text. Decide what is important. You have to figure out what it is that's actually relevant in the text. So when you think about it, in your class, if your teacher tells you, read chapter 3, we're going to have a quiz tomorrow. Chapter 3 may be 20 pages, but you have to figure out what information is the most important information that will be tested on. What are you going to be assessed on? So you have to decide what is important. Synthesizing information to aid in creating new meaning or a new thinking process. A lot of teachers feel like these things should have been learned in elementary school, and it's a realistic thought. Many secondary teachers feel this way. However, this text definitely does help teachers set realistic expectations. So we come in with the expectations that the students know how to read. They can read faster than they did in elementary school. They can read large amount of text in short amount of times. They gain information by reading, and they read and understand increasingly difficult material. And we don't exactly feel like we should have to teach them how to do these things, So moving to the purposes for reading. So students need to feel that what they're reading is relevant. They need to have a purpose for reading. They need to know why they're reading and why they should even attempt to comprehend what they're reading. And a lot of things that the students have to read, they feel like it's not important, honestly, and things that they read outside of school, they feel that that's not exactly reading and it doesn't count because it's not related to what they're reading in school. And that's not exactly the case. The only reason they feel that they have to read a lot of things is because, well, are we going to have a test on it? Are we going to have a quiz on it? Is this for a grade? And really, that should not be the only reason that students are reading. So some of the strategies that she does mention, I do have them later on in this presentation, but I do want to touch on thinking aloud because modeling your thinking is really important for students because when they read a text, they don't know exactly what they should be thinking or what they should be writing down or what they should be saying or what they should be getting out of the text because they already don't feel that it's relevant. So think alouds or mental modeling are very powerful when it comes to text, especially difficult text. So she explains exactly how to go about doing think aloud. So she says you should select a short piece of text, foresee difficulty. So you have to know your students. You have to have that relationship with your students in order to know what problems they'll have with that text. Read the text aloud, stop periodically, model your thinking, tell your students what you're thinking, and it'll get their juices flowing. It really will. I've actually tried this strategy. Point out words in the text that trigger your thinking. She also talks about marking the text, how to know when you're stuck, how to approach being stuck, how to question the process. Some teaching points that she had that I thought were really good were good readers read for different purposes. Having a purpose helps readers remember what they read and helps them determine what is important. So if students can apply what they're reading to real life, it'll give them that relevance that they need. So this is where she gets into giving students ownership of their comprehension. So moving on to like chapter 4, how do I know I'm stuck? So she says on page 37, once students acknowledge that they can and should be in control of their reading, they need to know when they are confused. And this is a list of how students can know when they're stuck. And if you provide this to your students, it'll actually be a really useful tool. So they'll know when they don't have an inner voice talking, they can't visualize, when they're daydreaming, their mind wanders off, when they can't recall the information, when they can't answer questions, and when they're unable to recall characters from a short story. So here we have a few of the strategies that she listed for students to use when they are stuck, how they can fix being stuck while they're reading. I'm not going to actually read through all of these because they are all mentioned throughout the text, but I thought this was a really, really good tool to provide to students. Moving on. So here I've provided a few of the resources that are at the very back of the book. These are also the resources that are mentioned throughout the book that students can use to help them comprehend the text that they're reading. We have double entry journals, comprehension constructors, double entry diaries, And that is my review. I hope you enjoyed it.